The normal sounds of a college campus were suddenly drowned out by a terrifying low-frequency growl. A strange purple mist began to swirl around Rob's feet, defying the laws of physics. Before he could call out to his friend Jason, a massive void opened beneath him. He tumbled through a cold, lightless dimension where time seemed to stretch and warp. Rob woke up face down in the dirt, the smell of damp earth and ancient pine filling his lungs. Rising to his feet, he realized he was no longer wearing his sneakers but strange leather boots. A heavy weight on his back prompted him to reach back and pull out a rusted iron sword. The moment his finger brushed the blade's edge, a blue holographic window flickered into existence. The screen displayed his name and a shockingly low level of 0. A rustle in the bushes nearby alerted him that he was not alone in this strange land. A giant mutated forest spider lunged out, its multiple eyes fixed on its new prey. Rob swung his sword wildly, driven by a primal instinct to stay alive. The blade found its mark, and the creature dissolved into a shower of digital pixels. A series of rapid pings filled his ears as his level jumped from 0 to 4 instantly. He realized that in this world, his human biology acted like a sponge for experience points. To survive, he would need to hunt every creature he could find in these woods. As hours passed, his stomach growled, reminding him that he was still very much human. He leaned against a tree, the weight of his loneliness finally starting to settle in. A distant horn blast echoed through the trees, signaling the presence of others. He thought it might be a way home, but he was blissfully unaware of the danger he represented. Far away in an elven city, high elders gathered to discuss the human vibration they felt. They spoke of the ancient wars and the terror that a single human could unleash. They summoned their best ranger to hunt down the anomaly before it reached level 10. Riordan accepted the mission, though his heart was heavy with the memories of lost kin. Back in the woods, Rob found a strange fruit that looked like a glowing blue apple. He took a bite, and immediately his perception stat began to climb rapidly. Suddenly, he could hear the heartbeat of every creature within 100 yards. He heard the whistle of an arrow just a split second before it would have pierced his skull. He turned to see a group of green-clad figures moving through the trees like ghosts. Rob raised his sword, knowing that the real fight for his life had just begun. Riordan stepped into the clearing, his bow already notched with a second, glowing arrow. The elf looked at the human boy not with hatred, but with a profound sense of pity. Rob shouted for them to stay back, his voice cracking with the strain of the situation. Riordan spoke in a melodic tongue that Rob's system automatically translated into English. The system informed him that his linguistic comprehension skill had just reached level 1. The other rangers didn't wait for a conversation and launched a coordinated strike. Rob moved faster than he ever thought possible, his body fueled by a 99x growth multiplier. The elves gasped as they saw the humans' level tick upward in the middle of the fight. A massive tremor shook the ground, interrupting the execution and throwing everyone off balance. From the shadows of a nearby cave, a roar erupted that made the elven arrows seem like toys. Riordan realized that their internal conflict had just summoned the Lord of the Forest. Rob gripped his sword tighter, realizing he would have to fight alongside his enemies to survive. Rob stood amidst the smoldering remains of the monster, his heart drumming against his ribs. A blue translucent screen flickered into existence before his eyes, pulsing with an eerie light. He watched as his experience bar surged forward with unnatural speed, filling up in mere seconds. The system announced his level increase, accompanied by a sudden rush of physical strength throughout his limbs. He realized that every monster he killed was granting him nearly 100 times the normal rewards. Far away in the crystal spires of the Elven capital, a massive magical orb began to vibrate violently. Elven scholars gathered around the artifact, whispering in hushed, panicked tones about the detected anomaly. The High Elder slammed his staff against the floor, demanding silence from the trembling crowd. He declared that the ancient scent of a human had once again stained the soil of their world. To the elves, humans were not just extinct myths, but the very monsters that nearly destroyed the planet. From the shadows of the council chamber, a tall figure in green leather armor stepped forward. Riordan bowed his head, his silver hair cascading over his shoulders as he awaited his orders. The High Elder ordered him to find the human and execute him before his power could fully manifest. Riordan didn't utter a word, simply turning on his heel and vanishing into a swirl of leaves. Back in the woods, Rob was struggling to navigate through the increasingly dense undergrowth. Every rustle in the bushes made him jump, his senses heightened by his recent level-ups. He noticed a trail of strange, glowing liquid leading deeper into a rocky ravine. Despite his fear, a strange compulsion driven by his growth system urged him to follow the path. High above the trees, Riordan moved with the speed of a hunting falcon, leaping between branches. he tracked the human's clumsy movements by the broken twigs and disturbed mana in the air. To the elf, the human's presence was like a loud, obnoxious noise in a peaceful symphony. He drew a single arrow from his quiver, the tip etched with runes of paralysis. Rob entered the mouth of the ravine, feeling the temperature drop significantly. The sound of his own breathing echoed off the damp walls, amplifying his isolation. Suddenly, a sharp whistle cut through the air, followed by a sudden impact against the stone next to his head. Rob dove behind a large boulder just as a second arrow hissed past his shoulder. He looked up to see a silver-haired elf standing on a high ledge, bow drawn with lethal grace. Riordan's voice rang out like ice, declaring that the human's journey ended here. Rob shouted back, trying to explain that he didn't even know how he got here. The elf ignored his pleas, releasing a volley of 3 arrows simultaneously in a display of master archery. Rob's survival instincts kicked in, and his system screen flashed a red warning for an incoming lethal attack. He swung his sword in a desperate arc, managed to deflect one of the arrows with a loud metallic clang. However, the second arrow grazed his thigh, sending a jolt of numbing magic through his leg. Feeling the poison spread, Rob realized that talking was no longer an option if he wanted to live. Riordan's eyes widened slightly as he saw the human's wounds begin to knit back together instantly. The 99x growth rate wasn't just for experience, it was accelerating his physical recovery to superhuman levels. Rob lunged forward, using his newfound agility to scramble up the rocky wall toward the elf. Riordan dropped his bow and drew a pair of curved daggers, prepared for close-quarters combat. The two clashed at the edge of the precipice, their weapons creating a shower of sparks with every strike. Just as Riordan prepared to land a finishing blow, the ground beneath them began to rumble with a terrifying intensity. A massive, multi-headed shadow emerged from the depths of the ravine, looming over both the human and the elf. The Chimera let out a bone-chilling roar, and the ledge they were standing on finally gave way, sending them both plummeting into the abyss. Gravity claimed them instantly as the stone ledge crumbled into a million jagged pieces. Rob reached out desperately through the rushing air to grab Lyrael's hand before she drifted too far away. Their fingers locked together just as a gust of subterranean wind threatened to separate them forever. Rob activated his weight distribution skill to slow their terminal velocity before they hit the hard floor. They slammed into a pile of soft fungal moss that cushioned the worst of the impact. Lyrael coughed as she pushed herself up from the damp ground, her silver hair matted with dirt. Rob stood up and immediately checked his glowing interface to assess the damage to his health bar. A low guttering growl echoed from the shadows of the cave wall, vibrating in their very bones. The Chimera emerged from the darkness, its lion head snarling while its goat head hissed with venomous intent. Lyrael reached for her bow only to find it snapped in two during the violent fall. Rob stepped in front of her, drawing a basic iron sword he had scavenged earlier. Lyrael watched the human youth, wondering why he would risk his life for an elf who had hunted him. Rob shouted for Lyrael to find any remaining arrows while he distracted the beast. The Chimera lunged forward with a speed that defied its massive, muscular bulk. Rob barely dodged the massive claws, feeling the wind of the beast's passage whip against his face. Lyrael managed to recover 3 enchanted arrows and a small dagger from the wreckage of her gear. Rob's system screen flashed a warning that the Chimera was level 50, far higher than his current state. He realized he needed to trigger an evolution in the middle of this fight to even stand a chance. The Chimera's snake tail struck like a whip, catching Rob across the ribs and throwing him into a stone pillar. Rob spat out a mouthful of blood, his vision blurring as his health plummeted to critical levels. Lyrael charged the beast with her dagger, her movements a blur of elven grace and desperation. The monster's hide was too thick for her small blade to penetrate effectively. Suddenly, a notification chime rang out as Rob's passive growth trait finally kicked into overdrive. Lyrael stared in awe as the human's level jumped from 10 to 40 in a matter of seconds. Rob's tattered clothes were replaced by a shimmering aura of mana that solidified into a spectral armor. The Chimera, sensing the sudden shift in power, roared with both its heads and charged once more. Rob caught the beast's massive paw with a single hand, the impact cracking the ground beneath him. He told Lyrael to aim for the glowing purple eye of the goat head while he held it steady. Lyrael took aim with her steady hand, channeling her remaining elven mana into the enchanted arrow tip. She threw the arrow with perfect accuracy, piercing the Chimera's secondary head right through the pupil. The beast shrieked in a dual-toned howl of pain, its movements becoming frantic and uncoordinated. Rob summoned all his mana into his blade, turning the simple iron sword into a beam of pure light. With a single, powerful horizontal slash, he cleaved through the neck of the primary lion head. The massive body of the Chimera slumped to the ground, its dark mana dissipating into the air. Rob fell to one knee, his spectral armor vanishing as the adrenaline began to fade. Lirael approached him slowly, her dagger still held at her side, but no longer pointed at him. She thanked him for saving her life, admitting that her leaders had been wrong about the human threat. Rob took her hand, realizing that they had both grown stronger through this unlikely partnership. They decided to travel together to the capital, hoping to bridge the gap between their warring races. As they emerged into the sunlight, the system interface displayed a final message: human evolution complete. The world was still dangerous, but for the first time since the cataclysm, there was a glimmer of hope for humanity.